It's stampless covers with money letter markings. And first of all, what are they? Money letters are basically the precursor to registered letters, what we call registered letters now. It's based on the UK system that was adopted. And then it's introduced in Canada in 1825, perhaps early, but there's no documented evidence or covers with it. Initially, there was a manuscript, money or money letter, cash or cash letter, or just a large M on the cover. Then they introduced brass hand stamps in 1831. And then they started adding letter bill numbers, which is basically what you call a tracking number. And the postmaster would put a number on it. And then when he packaged up the whole batch of mail to go on to the next post office, he'd package them up, tie a string around them, include a list of the letters and letter bill numbers that were included. There's generally contained banknotes or currency. There was no extra postage, except, of course, the extra currency added to the weight. And everything was based on the weight of the letter and the distance at that time, in this time that we're looking at. And it was before the adoption of standard rates that were independent of distance. No insurance against loss, but the sender, when he picked it up, would have to sign a receipt form, and the postmaster's letter bill that accompanied the mail would make special note of any letters or registered or money letters in the system. In 1850s, we had registration, and thanks to David Handelman and his exhibit, that's available on the internet. So here we're looking at some manuscript examples. Here we see the money written up in the top here. And then the postage is 1 and 10, which is 1 shilling and 10 pence. You see this often on letters. And if it's black, it means it's collect, not prepaid. This was to the Receiver General in Kingston, who's basically the government. The government, he's the tax collector for the country, or the part of Canada, at least, that was called Canada at that time, before Canada became Canada. And it has St. Catherine's double split ring cancel. Interestingly, they did misspell Catherine's as C-A-T-H-A-R, and it has an inverted double month and date in there. Here's a second example, again with the money here. It paid 3 shillings 6 pence, which would probably meant it was a triple weight. Toronto to Montreal would have been 1 and 2, and this is now 3 and 6, so it's obviously the triple rate. From a Toronto banker with a beautiful Toronto cancel. This is the cancel from the first post office in Toronto on Adelaide Street, which is now a museum too. If you're ever in Toronto, it's a worthwhile stop. And to a steamboat and canal operator in Montreal. So there's officially 6 different kinds of money letter hand stamps, and they've been classified as RH1 and RH6. I don't know. I think it probably means registered hand stamp 1. And my thanks to Hugo for providing this scan for me. And I thought, look, if there's only 6 available, I can try to make an effort to get one of each. So we're going to go through them here. Here's type 1. It's the ugliest one I have of this one. Here, it's right up here. And it's on a letter from Perth to the secretary of the lodge, Brockville Lodge of Freemasons. He paid 3D. So that's there. It's in red. And there should be a paid marking somewhere. No, there isn't. It's just the fact that it's in red. He enclosed 5 shillings for a copy of a sermon that had been delivered. Here's the cancel from London and a Toronto receiver. Now, this is an exhibit page from an exhibit that I bought, and it was fascinating because it talked about the requirement for backstamping on this cover. And it says that in 1843, the deputy postmaster set out a letter to everyone with this regulation saying, from the receipt of this order, I must require you immediately after opening the mails and checking their contents to make a legible impression of your office stamp on the back of each letter, thus showing the actual date of its reception at your office. Postmasters not provided with data stamps will supply the want with pen and ink. I must request that be most carefully observed throughout the department. The rule laid here down is not intended to any way interfere with the established custom of postmarking on the front all letters posted at your office. So this is interesting because it puts into period the requirement for backstamping on Canadian mail.
Arnie, it refers to opening the mails and checking their contents. That
What
doesn't
he's
mean
meaning is
opening
that
the
he's
letters.
opening
It's what, the mail bags or something?
yeah, the package. They would be
Ah,
tied up with string or in a bag or
right.
something like that. That he has to, that's the opening of, obviously he's not opening the letters. He's just
Yeah.
opening the container that's carrying the letters. And then he goes on, and here's the example of the cover that was in this exhibit. And again, we see money letter and an ink, a brass hand stamp, paying 1 and 6 for from Côte du Lac to Montreal. And on the back, there is now a back stamp. Now, this is interesting because the back stamp here is August 43. And this cover shows the use of the UK brass money letter hand stamps that was assigned to Montreal. It's also the earliest known cover adapting the process of backstamping, about 20 days after the backstamping regulation was instituted. This is a RH2. This is this other type of cancel money letter. Here's another one that just added yesterday to the presentation. It's an RH2 and a manuscript. So we see both the money letter RH2 type hand stamp. We see manuscript money. And here in the middle, we see a huge M. That also means money. Draws attention to the fact that this is an important letter. And it is also addressed to the Commissioner of Crown Lands in Toronto, where the Bytown is what Ottawa used to be called before it became Ottawa. And it's free. And why is it free? Because up here, its initial, G.W. Baker, is the postmaster. And so the rules at that time allowed postmasters to send up to 1 page of weight free. Well, he was pretty liberal in this because it's actually more than 2 pages. And also it included 50 pounds, 50 shillings, and 0 pence as a partial payment for some land. Type RH3, this is what this one looks like here. It's the only one that has a boxed shape to it. And it's also marked too late, meaning that he had already dispatched his mail from his post office onto the next post office when this letter came in. So that's why he got the too late marking. And it's from the Bank of the People in Montreal to Mr. Kennedy Esquire. And in Canadian philately, we see an inordinate number of letters addressed to Mr. D.S. Kennedy on Wall Street in New York. It's very, very, he got an awful lot of mail from Canada and he kept all the covers, and it's fascinating, high value stuff for collectibles. Here's type RH4. This is a bigger font, similar to the others in terms of styles. The Kingston double split ring cancel, paying, here it's hard to read, but it's clearly a 2 and 4. So that would be a double rate probably of something, or depending on how far I was going from Montreal to Quebec, maybe it was a triple rate something. It was also marked paid. So this was prepaid, and marked too late, missed the day's mail. That's type 4 with the Quebec backstamp. Now this backstamp is actually 1842, which is before the postmaster actually made it official. This was attached to the cover. There's no formal order for the backstamping until August 10th, ... It contained a bill. And interestingly, Hugo, who collects and is a fabulous dealer in this area of Canadian, early Canadian, he recognized the typewriter that this was written on. So he knew where it came from. So Harry Lucy, he wrote a book and had an exhibit on money letters. Here's both types RH2 and RH4 on the same cover. You can see the difference between them. On a cover from Belleville to Montreal. Here's the first one of the first ones we see with a letter bill number. This is sort of the tracking number that the postmaster would use. He paid 3D. That would have been collect because it's in black. And it's from Belleville to Montreal. There's the Montreal back stamp. Here's type RH5. It is the only one that is sans serif, meaning it has no curly cues on the ends of the letters. It's straight, I guess, Helvetica type font, with none of the curves that you see or serifs that you see on a Times font. And from Brantford, playing triple rate, we double springly playing the triple rate from Brantford to Toronto. Paid. Here's another money letter marking. This wasn't on the list that we showed in the first slide. Paying 3 from 1855. Now it's just about the time registered letters started on May 1st, 1855. So this is just after it. Here's the back. But it is a fake money letter marking. This is not genuine. And here's another example of it. There's another one. This is now 2 years later, 1857, with a registered label and a money letter. Now it's interesting because I compared these two. And in this case, well, the T's were both high, but the Y's aren't at the same height. So this was two different hand stamps that were used to produce these fake ones. The Y's are at different levels. Here's an example number 3. Again, this has got the low Y example. Here's another example number 4 with the high Y. This is marked free. I mean, that might even be a fake mark. Well, no, that probably is genuine because there is no postage. And here's example number 5 of another fake one. This has got the high Y.
What would be the purpose of faking that?
It was done by some collectors who were playing tricks on one of the premier Canadian philatelists, whose name I will withhold because I've been asked to withhold it. And they were just playing tricks on him, and they would get these covers made and present them to him at shows and places at meetings and say, look what we found, and trying just to get him excited. But you'll see that the covers were generally after 1855, when registered mail would have been the norm. But it was for two collectors in particular who are fooling a third collector. Here we have example number 6. This is the one it led down a fascinating rabbit hole. Queenston, and it's addressed. So Queenston is right near Buffalo and across near Niagara Falls, right on the Canadian side of the Niagara River. It's addressed, paid 1 and 9, and to the Registrar of Court Probates in Toronto. On the back, it says, no, it's canceled the 19th. It says the 20th of February, 1840, Alex Hamilton Esquire of Hamilton. It's will entered and some initials here. That's what it says there. This letter obviously contained the will or some formal document associated with Alexander Hamilton Esquire. And who was Alexander Hamilton? Well, that's where the story gets interesting. He had died the 19th of February, 1839. So exactly 1 year before whoever the solicitor was in this case posted this one. He had obviously a 1 year time limit to send off whatever he had to do. Maybe there was some fees that had to be paid to probate the will, but he was a wealthy man. So there would have been substantial evidence of his wealth involved. But who was he? He's the 4th son of Robert and Catherine Hamilton. And here we see the A in Catherine. That's the lady after whom St. Catherine's was named. I don't know Hamilton, if the Robert was the Hamilton, the city of Hamilton named after Robert. I don't know that yet. Who was Robert? He is a very successful businessman, founder of Queenston. He had lots of land in Niagara. It sounds like a lot when I saw it at 83,000 acres. Well, it's basically just an 11 miles by 11 miles. It's still a lot of land, but his wife, Catherine, as I said, city of St. Catharines is named after her. Who was Alexander? He served in the War of 1812, so he would have been just about 20 years old when the War of 1812 started. He was the first mayor of Queenston. He had family connections, obviously, first sheriff of Niagara, and he was the postmaster. I've seen a letter addressed to him as the postmaster in 1826. Here it is, Chippewa Alexander Hamilton, postmaster. This is not in my collection. This is the only thing you'll see probably that's not in my collection. And here's what you still can see. The Willowbank is his residence on the Niagara River Parkway, near Niagara-on-the-Lake. But why else is he important? Well, the Short Hills Raiders. On June 10th, 1838, James Monroe led 26 American patriots in crossing the Niagara River. The patriots were Americans who felt that they could defeat the British in Canada. They came across the river expecting to find people who would support them and fight with them. That didn't happen. They thought about going back to the U.S. and there was a bit of a mutiny there, and some of the decided to take on the British forces at a tavern in St. John's near Thorold, near Short Hills is also what it's called. They were captured a few days later, condemned to death. Instead of the sentences were commuted and they were transported to Van Diemen's Land, which is in Tasmania, off Australia. But the government decided there had to be at least one person who had to be hung, just as a deterrent. And so when the executioner failed to appear to carry out the sentence of death on James Monroe, one of the leaders of the raid, Hamilton our postmaster, performed it himself on July 30th, having arranged as an act of kindness that Monroe drop 18 feet before the rope snapped his neck. He was later complimented by the government for the cool and firm manner in which the execution was performed. So we have a postmaster who's also an executioner. Not sure if there's too many of those around. July 30th, James Monroe, professed his faith in God, was received in the Catholic Church, baptized, and on July 31st, he was executed. There's a little bit of a misconception of the date here. He's buried in an unmarked grave in the pauper section of the St. Vincent de Paul graveyard on Niagara-on-the-Lake. And these are my sources, fascinating source, Wikipedia, Bruce Wilson and his Dictionary of Canadian Biography, and Niagara Now, where they talk about the Vincent de Paul graveyard and its history. So, what a rabbit hole. And 4 letters. Here are 4 more letters. These are, we've seen them in the presentation. Maybe. So it begs the question, what is the collective noun for a bunch of letters? The official
most
is
natural.
a mail of letters.
Mail of letters.
From the French word mail, which means mesh and refers to the mailbag carried by the postman. Okay, any questions?